Hello and welcome to Overtime Hockey Talk. My name is Mark Paul. Joining me, as always, Justin Baker. Hi, Justin.
Hi, Mark.
I like the hat. What's on the other side of the hat? That's what we need to. Everyone's gonna want to know. Okay, North Face. All right, fair enough. Solid hat.
Thank you.
And some solid series. We're gonna start off with the show covering both Western and Eastern Conference Finals. One between the Dallas Stars and the Edmonton Oilers, and the other the Florida Panthers and the New York Rangers. As well, it has been a minute that a few coaches have been hired, and we're gonna break down. The Devils hiring Sheldon Keefe, the Leafs and Craig Berube. Oh, there's another one, and it'll
Dan
come to me.
Bylsma.
Dan Bylsma in Seattle.
Yeah.
That's right. Yes. And I think we had talked about that actually on our last show. That was a possibility, but we'll get into all those things and any rumors that we're hearing throughout the league. But let's start with the Eastern Conference, because that is, we're headed into Game 6, which is happening in 6 hours from now. It's about 2:45 p.m. Eastern time on Saturday, June the 1st. So we're going to see that game. By the time you're watching this, the game's likely over. Regardless, like Florida wins tonight or not, maybe it gets pushed to a Game 7. What are your thoughts on this series through the first 5 games?
Well, better go to Game 7 because, my latest TikTok, I'm like, come on, Rangers. But, really for me, I've enjoyed the goaltending battle so far with this whole series. It seems every night it's super tight. It's so hard to get to sneak one past either one of these goaltenders right now. And, honestly, if you had to pick, the 2 top goaltenders so far left in the playoffs, it'd be these 2 guys. Yeah,
there's an argument that could be made for Ottinger at different points of the playoffs, but you would definitely look at him right now and you go, he's an average goalie right now.
Yeah, absolutely.
He's not losing anything for the Stars, but he's also not winning anything for the Stars.
Yeah, exactly. And they need him to do that. And the other thing, for me, noticing through the first 5 games of the series is just the absence of Chris Kreider and Mika Zibanejad. That top line hasn't been producing. And, if you look at the numbers on a whole, Zibanejad, has a point per game. He's produced, but it's primarily been, the first 2 rounds. They need him to come through if they're going to get past, Florida. And especially, like I mentioned, with both goaltenders playing so good and the series being so tight, they need other guys to produce, because when you look at Florida on the opposite end through 5 games, it hasn't been all Barkov or all Reinhart. It's been, a different guy every single game. It seems like steps up and, does it for them. And right now the Rangers, it seems like it's just Trocheck and Lafreniere, and that's pretty much it. And Gaudreau chips in, and that's been it really.
Yep. I think Kreider has a 1 shorthanded goal, which, it is funny that he had a shorthanded goal, but either way you look at it, he cannot score 5-on-5. He'll never score 5-on-5. So you're better off having fewer players on the ice for him to score. Yeah. And when you look at, it's really, you're right. It's been Trocheck, who has 2 goals in this series. He's got 5 points so far in this one against Florida. He's been good, but you can't, they've just been relying so heavily on Shesterkin. Like every game has been the Shesterkin show. But I will say Game 5 took a little bit of a turn where I know Florida still outshot New York. I think no matter what New York does, Florida's going to outshoot them because Florida just tends to have possession more. That's more their game. New York is more like, let's get in on the corners and let's try to force you to draw a penalty so we can get our power plays, which ironically hasn't been happening nearly as much, and they haven't really been scoring on the power play. So that's, I think, the one issue, or maybe there's more than one issue, but when you're the team, and the Dallas Stars are almost a mirror of the New York Rangers. When you're the team who can't get possession 5-on-5, you can win. Absolutely, you can win. Both teams proved through the first 2 rounds that you can win despite not necessarily winning the possession game. The Washington series aside, because it was Washington. But they don't have possession. And that's fine as long as your power play is going. As soon as that power play dries up, it's going to be trouble. And it's been trouble for the New York Rangers and really the Dallas Stars, which we'll get to. Anyone, I look at Adam Fox and I think about how much of a play driver he is, and I'm pretty sure he's hurt. I don't know how bad, but it's bad enough to make him look like he's practically invisible at times. And that's, I think, a huge reason why New York maybe is where they are. When you're probably maybe not their best player, but he is their their most important player on the ice outside of Shesterkin.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that at all. And right, I mean, when you look at offense, it starts at the back end, and that's what drives play up front for the Rangers, right? Because they like to chip it in, they like to go in the corners and get dirty. So if you don't have the back end moving the puck, it's going to be a long series for the Rangers because I mean, I'll be honest, they're not as fast as Florida. I think everybody knew that going in, that, you know, Florida had the edge when it came to speeds. You know, that neutral zone, it's about making that initial pass out of the defensive zone up to the forwards and then getting it chipped in and going into those corners and digging the puck out. And so that's the Rangers game. And, you know, Adam Fox, you're right. I haven't heard his name outside of the power play very much. And, you know, when he's kind of absent, it's hard to get offense going 5-on-5 when you're not really getting much play from your back end.
Yeah. And I expect whether or not Florida wins game 6, I think we'll see the Rangers' best game in game 6. I believe that. I think that is a team that they're not just going to go down without a fight. You know, they're definitely going to bring their A game. I think you'll see Shesterkin will be just as good. And honestly, all it takes, I mean, even in that game 5, you were like, oh, shoot, is Florida about to get Shesterkin again? And I'm sure Florida was thinking the same thing. Like, it was tight there for a minute until they kind of broke through. But I got to think that, I mean, if you're Florida and you look at these 5 games, I think you go, we are the better team. But we could easily be down 3-2 in this series. Easily. Which means this game 6 is not a foregone conclusion at all. And the Rangers have guys who can make things happen quickly and on a dime. I wonder about their injuries. I wonder who's hurt. You know, you were talking about Zibanejad not really doing a whole lot in this series. I wonder if he's hurt. And not that any time you don't produce, it means automatically he's probably hurt, but it's the playoffs. We're in the 3rd round. They probably are hurt. and so is everybody else, though. But I definitely think I looked at Adam Fox and I go, something's wrong. But you're going to take Adam Fox at 70% over the next guy. All right, let's shift gears. Let's go. Do you think the Rangers are going to come back?
I do. Yeah. I think they're going to get Shesterkin because, I mean, yes, I picked them to win the cup, but yeah, I got to stick with them.
All right. I think Florida's going to – I really want this series to go 7 games, so I'm just going to say 7. But I think Florida's going to take this one. It's been a fantastic series. I think it's been the better of the 2 series, and both series have been – like, I'd give both series an A as far as, like, the grade for how great the series has been. But this one has the slight edge. I think just because it's Shesterkin. And Bobrovsky. It's just been a great goaltending duo. So let's shift to Dallas and Edmonton. Edmonton, of course, last night beating the Stars and sending this one, you know, we're going back to Edmonton up 3-2 for the Oilers. And it was Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, which I thought it was funny. Everything I was seeing about Ryan Nugent-Hopkins was like, he's the heart of the team, the coach's favorite. And I don't know how I never picked up on this. I guess it's a thing, but Ryan Nugent-Hopkins is apparently Chris Knobloch's favorite on the team, and he knows it, and everybody gives him shit for it. But it was like all over social media, like the coach's favorite got another one. I loved it. What do you think of the way that Edmonton has played the Stars in the first 5 games?
I think, especially this last game, you know, Edmonton's very north and south, right? They like to just hit you with speed and just head right up the middle and you know, straight through your gut. And there have been, you know, obviously those games where Dallas has come away with the W, they've been able to slow that down, and they really failed to do that, I think, in game 5. They were super absent. And I think the biggest thing for me with Dallas is they're not showing up to start the games. I don't know if maybe they just don't have the right alarm set or they don't have their clocks on the right time zone, but they're not showing up to start these games. It seems like almost every game, Edmonton's out shooting them 10-2 to start things off, and really Ottinger's having to hold the fort, you know, without it getting out of hand. And that's been the repeating theme for me every single game, I feel like.
Yeah, I don't know if you watched the press conference following game 5, but of course, you know, hey, we're deep into the playoffs now, and ESPN starts to send some bigger name people, and Tim Collishaw was there. I don't know if you ever watched, I think it was like Around the Horn, or, you know, he was one of the guys on there, and he asked Pete DeBoer, head coach of the Stars, he's asking him, you know, essentially like questioning the team's character and like why they aren't getting started on time. And, you know, I think it ended with Pete DeBoer saying, go ahead and write the fuck whatever you want. And
I missed that.
and just got on him. Like, you're going to question this team's character. You're going to write whatever the fuck you want.
Mm.
And I think he was like, you don't even know this team. You're not even here. You just showed up for the playoffs, which is so true. I mean, hockey is the one sport. I mean, you've got the NFL, you've got baseball, where ESPN covers them all year long from like a beat reporter kind of viewpoint. But hockey's the one that, playoffs start, we got to send people to it. So he got him pretty good. What do you think of Stuart Skinner and how he's played in this one? Because he was really maybe the weak link headed into this series. How do you think he's played?
He's a roller coaster for me. There's been a couple games where I just look at him and I'm like, really, dude, you're letting in a soft one here, letting a soft one there. But then he'll turn around and make really spectacular saves. I don't know if you remember that goal, that Robertson goal where he's down by the post and he just banked it in off his back, right? Like, he lets in those soft ones every once in a while, and it's, it's detrimental to this team sometimes. And, there's been a lack of consistency for me with Stuart Skinner's play. And I mean, it hasn't been super terrible where I'm like, clearly outside of, I think, that Robertson hat trick game, I think, I haven't really looked at any other game and say, you're really the reason they've lost. But he hasn't done anything, in my opinion, to win them games, but he's been solid enough to keep them in it. And, obviously he's let the big guys do their thing and take over. And that's all he needs to do, really. I mean, that's all he's expected to do, much like when Kemper was in Colorado, right? He wasn't expected to steal games. He was just expected to hold the fort down and let McKinnon, Rantanen, and Landeskog do their thing.
Yeah. Although Kemper was still paid like $5 million, I think, for the Avs.
Yeah.
And when you look at the four goalies left, you've got Bobrovsky making 10, right? Bobrovsky makes 10. Shesterkin is at 5.6, which he is about to 5.5, 5.666667 for one more year, and then he's about to get, his 9.
How about money?
I think he'll get Vasilevsky. I think that's the kind of deal he'll get. I don't know that anyone's getting 10. I don't know that. We'll talk goalies in the offseason as far as their contracts go. But you've got Shesterkin at 5.6, but that deal was signed a little while ago and during the dead cap kind of time. So I would think that he's an $8 million goalie. Dallas, Jake Ottinger, he's at $4 million for one more year. And then little Stuart Skinner is at like 2.6. And when you pay somebody 2.6, little, I don't mean he's small. He was not even supposed to be the number one goalie when Jack Campbell was signed for his $5 million. And so $2.6 million, another 2 years after this. And I mean, for what you get with Stuart Skinner, which you're right, not the most consistent all the time. He's not the world's greatest goalie, but at $2.6 million, what goalie would you rather have making less than $2.6 million a year?
I mean, you're getting what you pay for, right? And that's what they're getting.
Yeah, 100%. And he's been great for $2.6 million. Like, he's making less than half of what Shesterkin makes. He makes $1.5 million less than Ottinger, and he makes a fourth of what Bobrovsky makes. And that is what allows you to have the rest of the team that the Oilers have. And so I think he's been good enough. I mean, they're one game away from the Stanley Cup Finals. And yes, Calvin Pickard had to come in for a couple games against Vancouver. But that, I think, was a really good thing for the Oilers because they tightened up defensively. And I think the Vancouver Canucks prepared the Edmonton Oilers for the Dallas Stars. So because the Vancouver Canucks weren't going to have huge possession numbers against the Oilers. They also didn't have the depth that the Stars had. They also had an AHL goalie who she loves. I mean, he looked really good. He wasn't expected to be there. And I think when you look at it, Dallas is almost like a much better version of Vancouver. And they've played them really well. And I think they prepared them for Dallas. And it's clear it's going very well against them. And I mean, we'll see what Dallas can turn around here. I don't think Dallas is dead in the water. But I do think that they're going to have to somehow get on the Oilers just like early. Which they did do in Game 4, right? Was it Game 4? They went up 2-0.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, that's the key, right? Get in there early.
And they lost. Game 4. I think they got Was it game 4?
No, game 4 was the hat trick by Robertson, but still, I mean, that's the thing though. You have to show up and you got to get started early against this Edmonton team, and they got to just find a way. I mean, in my opinion, to slow down this power play. That's the big one for me, right? And they've got to get their power play going because I mean, Dallas is 0 for 11 so far in this series. I can't believe it, but Edmonton's leading the league in penalty kill. It's insane. Would never have thought that going into these playoffs.
And not to mention the power play that they have, which finally scored in game 5. And yes, it was game 4. The Stars got up 2-0 to start the game. Wyatt Johnson, Essa Lindell, and then the Oilers scored 5 straight. Which
that's right.
I thought in that game when I was watching it, I was like, oh, 2-0 Dallas. We're 5 minutes into the game. Stuart Skinner is going to lose it. He just tends to do better when he gets the incremental, okay, things are going well, and he gets better as the game goes along. But if you can get to him early, we've seen earlier in the playoffs where that kind of spells trouble for the Oilers. And he kind of shook that. So I think it also shows to the maturity of Stuart Skinner. He's getting better. He can be shell-shocked here early in a game, and it doesn't mean the game's over. That may be more of a testament to the freaking amazing team in front of him.
Yeah, I kind of feel bad for Stuart Skinner too, in a way, because Edmonton's had such bad goaltending for so long. If he was a $2.5 million goaltender on any other team, expectations would never be this high, because Edmonton has just suffered for so long with poor goaltending since, I mean, really they haven't got anything since, Hobby Bullen, and go back that far if you want, but
Wayne Rollison or something.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's just.
I think what was I going to say? Oh, it's gone.
It's gone.
I had something and it's gone. Yeah, I mean, I like Stuart Skinner. I think when you look at the goalies that have won the Stanley Cup lately, he kind of fits the bill, right? Like Aiden Hill and Darcy Kemper, like we talked about. I mean, Vasilevsky, but just like the last couple of years, somebody who just kind of finds their way in, and all you need is a goalie who's good enough. Got to make one more save than the next guy, and that's pretty much who Stuart Skinner is. He's nothing more than an average goalie in the league.
Yeah, and I mean, he can be a good goalie, right? I mean, he's still got time to develop, but for right now, that's all he has to be, average. That's it.
Yep. What do you see for the rest of this series? Where do you think we're going?
Oh, I mean, again, I think right now I think Edmonton's on a mission. I think, McDavid and Draisaitl, they look possessed. That top 4, whatever you want to call them, the core 4, like in Toronto, right? You've got Bouchard, Draisaitl, McDavid, Nuge. These guys are rolling right now. And I mean, yes, I've talked about the depth, and that's been my biggest key to why I picked Dallas in the series, is because up front, Dallas has got so much more depth. But if Edmonton continues to play defensively like they have and get average goaltending, I think these 4 guys up front for them, and Bouchard on the back end, they're just playing so well, and they just seem possessed, like they finally want to get over that hump. They've been trying to get to the finals for so long. I think right now they're going to close it out. I can't see. I have a hard time picking Dallas to come back in this, to say the least.
Yeah, I would agree. I can see them winning a game. I can see Dallas going into Edmonton, a lot of pressure, and Dallas finds a way. I think, you give these 2 games, I think that, Edmonton just has the puck so often. I think through the series, we're like 122 to 102 shots 5-on-5, Edmonton leading the way, but just their penalty kill has been fantastic. Everything has been really good for the Oilers outside of maybe the power play. And the power play finally struck in game 5 and they won.
And the other big thing too, that
I'm just, when I look at Dallas, I wonder.
Yeah, the other big thing for me with Edmonton is, outside of game 1, that double overtime, they've started over 50% of the draws in the offensive zone. So if you can't keep them out of the offensive zone, it's not going to end well.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's very true. And, I think it was early in this series, or before the series started, the whole thing, and I think I actually did a TikTok on it. You can find us on TikTok, ot.hockey.talk. Because for some reason, OT Hockey Talk's gone, but there's no account. I can't get it. So there's some dots in between, but you can find us on there. And I said, I think that the way the Oilers will beat them is through possession. And that's probably the one falter of the Dallas system, is that they don't have the puck enough. And it's proven very true in this series. And I will say, I know you want the New York Rangers to win, but when you look at the possession numbers of the Panthers and the Oilers, how does it not just tickle you just a little bit to go, damn, if both those teams play each other in the finals, they both want the puck all the time. Which team is actually going to be the one that has the puck? Because they both play. It'd be like if the Rangers and the Stars ended up in the finals together. I think you just have the puck sitting there, and the guys would be checking each other, but they'd never touch the puck. These two teams are going to be, they want the puck. And I think it's going to make for an unbelievable final. I think we are steamrolling ahead to a Panthers-Oilers final. And I know the league would love the Rangers to be in the final with the Oilers. I think that would be the number one ratings success if you had all of Canada and all of New York and the surrounding areas watching the Stanley Cup Finals. You'd get some big numbers, but I think it's going to be Florida, Edmonton, and I think it's going to be fast, and everyone wants the puck. It's going to be crazy.
Yeah, if you're the league, you want Edmonton in there because you want all of Canada to watch it, man. It's been so long since Canada's had a cup.
You need McDavid to lift that cup over his head.
Solidifies him as an all-time great. You got to win one.
Right. And you want to have, he is one of your greats. Based on what he's done the first 8 years, 9 years of his career, he is Hall of Fame, maybe skip the ballot, skip the wait time kind of Hall of Famer.
Skip the wait time. Okay.
We'll see what happens. But I think by the end of it, you could be in that spot. But you want someone like that. It's the same, you want McDavid winning a cup. You want Matthews to have a cup. You want Bedard to eventually get his cup. You want your superstar players to win a cup. And it has been a good chunk of time. I think Nathan McKinnon finally winning his cup in Colorado. I think this would be seen as a very similar, he's different this year. You can see it in his eyes. Him and Draisaitl are weathered, but in a good way. It's like they've been through too much. We can't lose again. And it's what I would love to see in some of, as a Leafs fan, I'd like to see what I see in their eyes in certain players on the Leafs. But all that to be said, I think we're in store for maybe one of the best finals that we've had in a very long time.
Okay. Part of me is, I'll be honest with you, part of me is a little romantic and want to see Adam Henrique win one here. So we'll see.
Adam Henrique.
Yes.
What is the romanticism with Adam Henrique? Did you guys, did he give you a blowy or something? Sorry, Adam. You can just see your face turning more and more red. Oh, there it goes. I'll have to put an effect on you for that one.
Thanks.
What is it about Adam Henrique the real reason you want him to win a cup?
Just because he's been stuck in Anaheim for so long, man. I just felt bad for him. And, he's always been
was in a final.
Player. I know that.
Wasn't
New Jersey.
Wasn't he when he was on New Jersey?
Yeah.
He was there in 2012, right?
Yeah, but they didn't win, and, I think what was it? If I remember correctly, he got the overtime winner to take them to the finals. He's been clutch for teams in the past, and he hasn't been able to go to the playoffs since. So it's, when you get a guy that's just been, I don't want to say just playoff stricken for so long, he finally gets in and, after such a long drought, it's, man, you know what? I really want to see good things for this guy. And especially coming back from injury, man, and he scores that goal. It was almost like, it's a nice little storybook ending, maybe.
It's fate. Yeah, I think that'll be a great final. I was going to ask you, do you think, this is sort of unrelated but related, we were talking about how greatness is almost measured. You got to have your Stanley Cup. Do you think, with what seems to be inevitable, 34 teams in the National Hockey League coming pretty soon, if there's 34 teams in the league and an average player, let's say a Hall of Fame player, how long do you have to play in general to be a Hall of Fame player? 12 years maybe is a minimum. I know there's been a few who play a little less than that, but you're usually not playing fewer than 1,000 games. I think Pavel Bure has fewer than 1,000. There's not very many guys in the Hall of Fame with fewer than 1,000.
Dadzuk has less than 1,000. I mean, I think at least you got to play 10 years, right? I think a minimum
and 10 years puts you at 820 games. Just not, and that assumes that you don't get hurt ever. So I think we'll say average guy probably plays 12 to 15 years, somewhere in that span. I mean, yes, there's going to be some that are less and more, but somewhere in the 12 to 15. So if you're in there in 15 years, even if a different team wins every single year, That's still not even half the league winning the cup in that 15-year span. So there's going to be some great players that win the Stanley Cup, but there will be 30 teams that go to the finals. Potentially, maybe you're probably going to have some overlap. It's not going to be 30 different teams. I wonder if it starts to get, he took his team to 4 conference finals, 2 Stanley Cup finals. Yeah, he never won it, but look at how far he took his team. And that's going to have to become a more important portion of that conversation because, yeah, when there were 6 teams in the league, if you never won a cup, forget about it. You couldn't beat the 5 other teams, or even you couldn't beat the 12 other teams or the 20 other teams. But now we're closer to 40 than anything at 34 teams. And I think at some point the conversation is going to have to shift to, oh, look at how many playoff games he won, or look at his playoff record or something like that. Of course, you always want the guys who win the Stanley Cup, you're just going to put them into a different category. But if you have really great regular season success and you just don't have the team in front of you, at some point you're going to have to start measuring playoff success as maybe a little bit differently than only winning or losing a Stanley Cup.
Yeah, I could see that. And I think it's essentially going to be, what did you do? Not necessarily what did you do, but like, how did you compete in the playoffs? If you show up and you're, 0.6, 0.5 points per game, or maybe you're 500 as far as win-losses as a goaltender, your numbers aren't great. So to me, that would be a mark of, if you're a guy who shows up and puts, a point per game in every single year and, just really puts the team on his back. But, of course, this is a team sport. We know that. And it's probably one of the better team sports in all of America, as far as, not having individual players. Like, for example, basketball, you can have one great guy and go far. But, in hockey, you need other guys to help you along the way. What did you do as far as, putting in your weight, right, towards that ultimate prize? And I think that's, maybe you might look at, too, during the regular season, some other accolades where, at the top of the pile, as far as,
yeah, you got to win some awards and all that. Yeah. Of course, there's other things that have to come into it as well. But I just think that eventually the conversation will have to shift. Look at how many conference finals he went to, or look at how many playoff rounds they won or something. Whereas that it's weighed much more heavily. Guys that are getting into the Hall of Fame even now, when there was like 26 teams and you add in 8 more teams. I mean, it's just, you've got such a fewer chance of even getting to the finals that it's tough. Yeah. Let's, should we shift to all the coaching hires?
I love it. Let's go.
All right. Let's go to the big one, because Craig Berube getting hired by the Leafs, that was probably the biggest news that broke that in this time span. And of course he comes in, kind of says like all the things that you expect him to say, didn't really say much at his press conference, and he's coming in and he's going to do some things. Now, we did see someone took a picture of Mitch Marner and Craig Berube in a coffee shop in Etobicoke. And of course, all of Leafs fans got hard, and they're trying to figure out what's going on. I think I want to know from you before little fangirl comes out here, but do you think Mitch Marner and the Leafs bringing in Craig Berube, does it make any difference? The Leafs deal him? What do they do here?
No, I don't think it makes a difference. I have heard that Marner has submitted a list of teams. I don't know how much truth there is to that, but again, I'm always a firm believer in where there's smoke, there's probably going to be fire at some points. Whether they can get a deal done is what ultimately ends up happening, where he lands. But regardless, let's just say Mitch Marner stays in Toronto, right? They can't find the right package. They just, decide, hey, we'd rather just keep this guy because we know we're not going to get a good return. We want to see if we can make it work. Give it a year. And if it doesn't work, we'll deal him at the draft for his rights or whatever, have you, or do a sign and trade, whatever. Anyways, to me, I think, again, when you talk about that coffee shop, that little meetup, you can say what you want. Was it Berube saying, hey, you know what, you got to go? Or, hey, these are the expectations, right? So it's,
don't talk to my guys.
Right. But for me, I think, more than anything else, it's, I think it's good on Berube to meet with every player, regardless where they're going to end up, because he has no control over that. You have to assume, if you're Berube, that, hey, Mitch Marner is going to be back next year. You don't go in with the assumption that they're going to trade him, because that would just be, that'd be the stupid way to play to play your hand right now. So you have to go on assuming he's going to be there. At least anybody who's signed is going to be there, right? And then if they get dealt, you obviously pivot along the way. So for Berube, create that relationship, start building that, that relationship have that foundation, and then know what Marner's expectations are. Maybe see what he wants to do. Maybe that was the whole point of that, because we know about Berube and what he's going to bring to Toronto. Maybe, we've already heard, oh, he's going to bring more structure. He's going to bring better defensive systems, yada, yada, yada. We don't know for sure what he's going to do,
I think
but,
the county is probably going to be the biggest.
Yeah, and maybe that was part of the sit down. It's just like, hey, you know what? This is what I've seen out of you. This is what I'd like to see going forward. And again, not assuming that he's on his way out. You don't want to, that would be a fool play. But to me, I'm excited to see. I would like to see Marner get another shot with this lineup and see what they can do with a new coach, a new system, and have a whole offseason to just kind of figure those things out. Right now, whether or not, again, management, Shanahan, the rest, Brad Trevilling, these guys ultimately deal Marner is, a whole nother issue, because you need some help on the back end. You need a goaltender. So we'll see what ultimately plays out. But I like at least that he started building that relationship with Marner.
I'm going to tell you what I think happened in the interview process with Craig Berube. Because, of course, you're coming in, like once you're at a certain point in the interview process, they're going to ask you about, what kind of line combinations, or like what structure are you going to play? What are you going to do with this guy? How are you going to play? What would you do with the goaltending situation right now? They're going to ask you all those questions, your approach. And I think they went like, what would you do with Mitch Marner if you were us? And I think he went, look, I've been able to take other players when I was in St. Louis. I took guys who maybe weren't known as being super tough, i.e. like a Tarasenko. I don't think that he was known as being super tough. And he took Tarasenko, and by the time he was done in St. Louis, by the time Tarasenko left, I know it's not like Tarasenko is going to go and blow anybody up. You don't want him to. But you looked at Tarasenko, like when they won their cup, he was a valuable part of that cup run. Like they don't win the cup without Tarasenko, and he was throwing hits. He was doing things that were very not Tarasenko. I think he went and just goes, I can do that for Marner. Like I can take this guy and I can mold him into the player that he can be. Like I can do it. I've done it before. So don't trade him, and of course management is going to go, I mean, we have to look at all options. Hey, if you can go out, you can get a stud defenseman for Marner, you might need to do it. Just because, not because you don't like Marner, but just because you need a defenseman who can. You look at all the teams left in the playoffs. Like Dallas has their Heiskanen, and I know the Leafs have Morgan Rielly, but most teams have the extra guy. You look at the Panthers, and it's Forsling and Ekblad, and you need a second. Montour, yep. And funny enough, Montour hasn't even been that great. But you need to have more than just one defenseman. And I don't think they have that guy I think at one point, TJ Brody may have been the guy who you're like, we can rely on him. He can stay at home, but he has since, that's no more. And he was never elite. I think he was just really good, maybe towards the beginning of that deal. So I think you look at it and you go, yeah, we need a defenseman. So if you can get one for Marner, I mean, it kind of makes sense. And it allows you to reallocate some cap space if that defenseman doesn't cost as much. Cool. But I think that he said that Berube went, I can get this guy to play the way that I want him to and the way that he can be successful so that come playoff time, he is a freaking monster. And I mean, if a coach came in and told you that and you go, all right, let's see what you can do. I mean, you can always trade Marner at the deadline. You can go, yeah, we want to see some progress. And if we see that he's starting to make some changes in his game to become the player we need him to become playoff time, then great. And you can always trade him at the deadline. Maybe that means he still has a good regular season. I mean, he's never going to in value unless he goes and, of course, like gets hurt or something. But I think that's got to be, like as a coach, you're never going, I don't want this guy. You're going to look at Marner and go, oh, I can make this guy what he needs to be.
I think any coach coming in and you look at that core four that Toronto has, and if you were, I mean, again, any coach in this league and you had the opportunity to coach those guys versus trading them away and trying to figure something else out, you would take those guys and be like, you know what, I'm going to take 300-point players and a stud defenseman and, and then of course, John Tavares, I don't know where you want to throw him, but, and I would say, shit, I'll take those guys any day, right? I mean, Most coaches don't even get one of those guys, let alone you get three of those offensive dynamic forwards. To be able to have that kind of that firepower up front, of course you're gonna, go in there and say, you know what, I can take this guy and I can kind of just tweak him a little bit and make him what I think he really could, what he needs to be a standout, you know, playoff performer. Again, I don't know what that is, what his approach is going to be, whether or not he's going to say, you know what, just don't focus on offense, focus on defense. The goals will come, right? Much like Bowman did with Yzerman, right? Hey, let's focus on this end of the game. Although, again, I don't think Marner really needs to focus on defense anyways. But
yeah, he's like your best penalty killer, and
yeah,
there's a lot of, there's a lot to. It's just come playoff time. It's like regular season, he's fine. No one has any complaints about him in the regular season. It's come playoff time, and that's everybody. Which, to me, you're like, oh, you need this coach to be able to go in and identify, is it the players or was it the system? Who could we replace in and around these guys to do this? And it seems like the Leafs have been trying that for a long time. So you look at those 4 or 5 guys and you go, which one needs to go? Who's the problem? Is it really Mitch Marner? Because you'd really cross your fingers and hope it's not Mitch Marner because he's talent-wise, he, outside Austin Matthews, he is your second best player. He's just overpaid. I think if he was making what Nylander made, I don't think we're having the same conversation.
No, I agree with you. And, again, I think it all comes down to what Berube really, maybe he went in and, during the interview process. And again, going back to that need for a defenseman, said, you know what, I need this, right? This is what I need. Maybe he would rather take a guy, or maybe, again, backing up a little bit, maybe he just went in and said, you know what, I want to stack my top line with Marner, Nylander, and Matthews, and then go out and get some journeymen, some work, so those middle 6 guys, like maybe a guy like David Perron, who he has familiarity with, a free agent, a guy who can come in a middle 6, probably is not going to be super expensive. Maybe a Max Domi, again, guys like that. Maybe he knows how to use those guys in the right way, or maybe he has some guys in mind where he's like, you know what, if I can get these 3 forwards here to work, to produce this way.
Domi worked really well alongside Matthews in that second half of the season.
Yeah, and again, we don't know what his thought process is going in and what kind of systems he's going to put in. But, you got to think, as Berube, I would, just be salivating to have a guy like Marner on my team who's, both offensively gifted and defensively gifted, and try to make it work.
Yep. All right, let's shift to Sheldon Keefe, who, of course, fired by the Leafs and hired very quickly to coach the New Jersey Devils and their young core, starting with Jack Hughes, Nico Hischier, Luke Hughes. Where do you think the Devils go from here with hiring Keefe? Like, what was their thought process?
I think their thought process was working with the younger guys, and not only working with younger players, but he's worked with high-end talent. He's got that experience with that high-end talent. I think that's when you look at Jack Hughes, you can throw Dougie Hamilton in there and a couple other guys, Nico Hischier, and that's, young guys who have a lot of talent. And, maybe they think, hey, this guy can come in and, tweak a couple little things. And, we saw what he did right towards the tail end there in Toronto for that last series. He was able to shift and get them to play a little bit more of a defensive game. And maybe they're thinking, you know what, just need him to come in and just help develop these younger guys. And then if necessary, just tweak a little bit, and again, I don't know what their long-term thought process is with a guy like Sheldon Keefe over maybe some more experienced guys. And, don't get me wrong, Keefe has got experience, but, he hasn't got past the second round. He's only been there once. So maybe their thought process is focusing on younger talent and bringing up guys in development versus having an experienced coach who maybe has gone deep in the playoffs, right? Like a Dan Bilesma, for example, a guy who's won it all. So he knows what it takes. And he's also worked with, higher end talent. Now, again, not to say that Bilesma wasn't on their radar, but maybe a guy like Todd McClellan who's been in the finals and, worked with some, higher end talent as well, too.
Yes, and I also think they looked at Sheldon Keefe and they went, this is a guy, yeah, sure, his team didn't win in the playoffs very often, the one time. Now, there are some, you can also look at it and go, all right, well, the first year that he took over, he was fired, like Babcock's fired halfway through the year. He takes over a team that was way out of the playoffs. They found their way into the playoffs, and they almost beat the Boston Bruins, who were really freaking good that year. And they pushed him to 7 games. So they're like, yeah, he did lose in the first round, but not all those first round losses were considered catastrophic. Like that year, it was, the Leafs lost in the first round, but like Sheldon Keefe's only been here for 3 months or 4 months, and they almost beat the Bruins. Cool. And I think it was another year, you're like, we lost to the Tampa Bay Lightning, who went on to win the Stanley Cup. It was that Montreal series was the one that was like, should have won that series. The Montreal series was killer. And I think that's really the one year where they should have won and they didn't. All the other years, I don't know that you would have looked back and gone, oh, the Leafs should have won that. So
yeah, and I mean, either way, I still look at, again, all those, early exits and even the second round loss there. They still showed up. They still competed. Right? They weren't just pushed over and swept and, looked like a bunch of jabronis.
well,
again,
look, I think the New Jersey Devils looked at him and said, all right, we went to the Stanley Cup final in 2012. Since then, we've made the playoffs twice. That's 2 times in 12 years they've made the playoffs. They won 1 round, and probably a very fortunate win in that round. They beat the New York Rangers, who were heavily favored, and they kind of had a miracle year that year a little bit based on what they did the year before. They had 63 points. And the year before that, they had 45 points. I know it was the COVID year, but they were bad. Then they had 112, and then they went back to 81. And I think they went, you are going to come in here, we are going to make the playoffs every year. And then we have a good enough team to advance through the playoffs. Yes, do they want to win the cup? Absolutely. But first and foremost, you got to make the playoffs every year. That's a non-negotiable when you are one of the best teams in the league. You make the playoffs pretty much every year. You can have a hiccup here and there. Tampa Bay had one hiccup that one year where everybody got hurt all year long and they missed the playoffs. Other than that, Tampa Bay has been in the playoffs every year. The Toronto Maple Leafs, they haven't won in the first round very much, but they made the playoffs every year. The Boston Bruins, they make the playoffs every damn year. That's where you got to get to first before you're going to go and you're going to win a cup.
And you got to think too, right? They've had Lindy Ruffin there for quite a while now. And you wonder, we had this old veteran coach, this guy kind of stuck in his ways. Why do we want to go out and find another veteran guy who's just going to, again, have that lack of flexibility? And maybe that's what they think in Sheldon Keefe, a guy who, again, a little newer hockey kind of guy and who has that flexibility to, change systems and isn't really just, again, stuck in his ways.
Yeah. Yeah. And, the other damning thing is since 2018, they finished 8th, 7th, 2nd, and 7th in the Metro. Like, it's either really all or nothing over the last 7 years.
Boy, you know what I would love? I would have loved to have seen Andrew Brunette take over this team from Lindy Ruff when he was the assistant there.
I know. He would have done really well. I mean, Florida, when they let Andrew Brunette go, we were both just like, why are you letting this guy go? And then they bring in Paul Maurice, and it ended up being like, that was the money hire. Paul Maurice has been so good. Did you see after Game 5, a reporter was like, yeah, so you guys only had one giveaway all game, and he just cracked up. He bent over and was laughing. Are you serious? And he said, who was it? Like, you want to know who it was? It was like, he was, don't tell me if it was Bobrovsky. And he says, no, it was Ekblad. And he's like, oh, he's out. He's off. He's out next game. And so I went and I looked the stats. One giveaway all game.
No shit.
Unreal. I think the Rangers had 12.
Yeah, that's one giveaway. That's a little unheard of.
It was funny. Like, he's just hilarious. He's so light and relaxed in those press conferences. He's fantastic. I think that we can go best coaches. He's easily my favorite coach in the NHL right now.
Sometimes, right, that personality, you need those guys to work with what you have as far as like player personnel, right? If you have the wrong personality type coach, it just doesn't work out sometimes.
Like, we kind of got like John Cooper got elevated so much, a couple cups in a row, and he made the finals. And it was kind of this, he's a very stoic, he's funny, but he's a lawyer. Right. And Paul Maurice is just not a lawyer. Like, Paul Maurice is the guy that you 100% would love to go and have drinks with. It'd be a riot to go and have drinks with. And
okay, I like
the amount of fun that he's having in Florida right now, you consider what happened in Winnipeg when he resigned, because he was basically like, I don't know what to do with these guys anymore. And this is not fun anymore. And there was a lot of stuff that came out that COVID really just wrecked it for him, and he didn't like being there anymore. And I think he has absolutely found the fun back in the game, and he's having a blast, probably because in Florida,
Miami's a fun
no
city.
pressure. That too. Yeah, that too. Let's talk about the final coach that was hired recently, and that is Dan Balsma, who many thought, I mean, it sure seemed like he was never going to coach in the NHL again after the shit show that went down in Buffalo when he was the coach there. What do you think about Balsma getting hired in Seattle?
I think it's great, man. I love seeing, I think it's been 7 years since his last head coaching job. And I think it's great to see guys get another chance. But not only that, he's in the organization already, right? So he's been their AHL coach with the Coachella, Firebirds. And, it's a great opportunity for him to come in. He knows the systems. He knows the personnel, the players, the management. So he's already familiar. He's ingrained in that organization. And you have the pedigree behind you too, right? So you're coming in, you've got the respect of the players. Hey, we've got a guy here who's played in, coached in Pittsburgh, won a cup. He knows what he's talking about a little bit, right? So there's going to be that respect. And plus he's done it very well in the AHL. I mean, he's had a lot of success there so far. They're still in the playoffs from what I understand. I haven't looked in the last few days, but they're still in it. And, again, when you have younger guys coming up through an organization that is so young, it's going to be very important to already have that established connection with a lot of those younger guys.
Yeah, they're actually up 2-0 in their series
nice.
right now, in the Western Conference Finals. I think the most important thing and the reason that ultimately they hired him, he took Shane Wright, who it seemed like everything was falling apart. He took him and he has molded him, and he is a damn good player for the Coachella Valley Firebirds. He has been fantastic, good defensively, like everything that he was touted for in juniors. That because because of COVID, he basically lost a whole year of playing because of COVID, and he did lose a whole year. And what's that going to do for a lot of these guys? I mean, we've seen it happen to other players too. And I think he's just been able to mold him, shape him, and he's been great defensively. He's scoring goals. He's got 22 goals in 59 games in the regular season. He's got 5 points through 6 games in the playoffs. Like, he has been fantastic. And if you can now bring Shane Wright up and he can be your number one center in the NHL because of what Balsma did, I think that's reason enough to hire him, because they need Shane Wright to be good.
Yeah. They need Wright and Matty
Beniers. Yep.
Yeah.
And if he can do the same thing for him, I got to think that's what they're looking at. They're going, look at who he coached when they won the Stanley Cup. I know it was like a very different game. 2008 Penguins in the finals. They went to the finals twice, right? 08 and 09. And you'll look at, I know it's Sidney Crosby. It's a big, I'm not saying any of these guys are Crosby or Malkin, but what he was able to do and shape young players. I mean, we have never, ever seen that again outside of Chicago and Pittsburgh. None of these like superstar players, like McDavid, we're 9 years in and he's finally knocking on the door of a final. Sidney Crosby won his first Stanley Cup in like his 5th year in the league. What Patrick Kane won his first Stanley Cup his 4th year in the league, 2010, right?
Didn't take long.
I got to think you're looking at it going, maybe he can do something. Maybe not, like, maybe we're not looking to those heights quite yet, but maybe he can do what he did with really young players to help them along and make deep runs in the playoffs. I mean, it's worth a shot. and he's clearly, I mean, we're talking almost 20 years later. Different game, different coach, I'm sure, than he was then. But I think it's a great hire. I love when teams go and promote their AHL head coach.
Yep, absolutely. Love it.
Oh, all right. Any final things you want to toss out there before we get out of here?
I know we kind of looked at this a little bit. We text a hot minute about Philip Hronek. I'd love to just kind of get your thoughts on Detroit giving him up, and now it's kind of clear why they gave him up. So everybody was kind of questioning the long term, like, oh my gosh, you know what, this guy could be a sweet 1-2 punch on the back end with Mo Seider, and why'd you give him up? And now it's pretty clear why they gave him up. Now it's going to cost a lot of money.
Yeah, of course. And there was an article that I had sent Justin, and it essentially said, hey, Vancouver, like Yzerman saw this for coming, so he got his draft picks, and now here's Vancouver, and they might not be able to sign Philip Hronek. who is he's an RFA with
Yep.
arbitration eligibility. So whatever the arbitrator would decide, if it gets that far, then they have to either take it or he becomes a free agent. I'm going to go the other way. I mean, yeah, I think Yzerman definitely knew that he was a good player. I don't think he knew he was going to be this good, nor did anyone think that he was going to be this important to Quinn Hughes.
That's the thing. I think they clicked. They found that chemistry, and you didn't have that in Detroit. At the time, Vancouver was desperate. Tyler Myers was not the greatest of defensemen on the right side, and so they were desperate to find somebody to match up who could play that speed game, be responsible defensively, and
What did he get
unfortunately
for
in Detroit,
Did he get a second and a fourth or something like that for?
he got a first and a second, I think it was.
A first and a second.
Yeah, I'm going to look it up.
Well, I mean, you can't complain about a first round pick. But I will say that the argument of he would have cost him a lot of money, therefore he shouldn't have traded him. I mean, Connor McDavid cost the Oilers a lot of money. Maybe they should trade him. There is a point where you go, I mean, in some respects, I don't think Yzerman knew that he was going to be this good. He's going to be Devin Taves. They've got to be looking at that and going, this is Devin Taves.
I think they're hoping that they're going to have their Makar-Taves pairing with Roenick and Hughes. And they got lucky with Hughes, too, and signed him as cheap as they did.
Right, which Devin Taves signed 7.25. But he's much older, though. He's 30 years old, and Roenick's only 26. I mean, I think that number is probably reasonable, somewhere between $7.5 million. I think you almost have to do it. And maybe Roenick kind of knows you're going to make Quinn Hughes real unhappy if you don't bring me back, because we both just had career years together and we got to within a sniff of the conference finals when we weren't even supposed to make the playoffs.
Yeah. And unfortunately, it might end up costing them maybe someone up front, right? Like, I don't want to say a Brock Besser, but you're going to have to move some money out to keep him because, you just paid Elias Pettersson. You've got JT Miller signed. And, of course,
I don't see a world where Mikheyev stays in Vancouver.
No, I can't either.
I think he's got to be the odd man out. I mean, he's making almost $5 million. He has a 12-team no-trade list, but you can work around that. And I don't see a world where he stays because you can't trade Connor Garland. After the playoffs that he just had, he was unreal. He was their best player, probably half those playoff games. He was fantastic.
He and Elias Pettersson were great. And Joshua, they have so many, RFAs and UFAs they have to look at. It's going to be crazy to try to, piece back a team, I think, after the year they had. And for Detroit, you mentioned we mentioned the first and second round. I'm looking at who they ended up drafting in 2023, and it was Axel Sandin Palika. And I'm not sure if you're familiar with him, but I mean, this kid he's going to be a stud in the NHL. And I think already a lot of, hockey writers out there, they've got him penciled in as like the number 1, number 2 prospect in Detroit's pool already. This guy's that good.
I mean, yeah, and that makes the trade worth it. I'm not saying that the trade wasn't a wise decision, but the argument of Yzerman knew he would cost too much. I don't know. I don't know that Yzerman would look at it and go, he's going to cost me too much. Because if he's going to cost you a lot, that means he's good. I don't think Yzerman is going, let's give up someone really good for a draft pick where I don't even know who we're going to get at this position at that time. Obviously they end up with a guy that they really like and it works out, but I don't know if he's going to be too expensive, so let's trade him. I think people are overvaluing him right now, and I can get a first and a second round pick for this guy. Let's go. And then he ended up being better than I think anyone thought. At the same time, though, I don't think Yzerman's going to regret it because of the pick that he got, but also he'd go, we don't have Quinn Hughes. And that's great for him. He's great with him, but he's not playing. It's not like we were going to put Roenick with Ben Chariot and he was going to be good all of a sudden. Him and Moritz Seider didn't play the same way together that Hughes and him are playing together. So I think it was a win. Like, everybody can smile and be happy about it. As long as Vancouver signs him. If Vancouver doesn't sign him, then Vancouver's going to be real pissed.
Yeah, I mean, I think they could probably get a first rounder for him, but I don't know if they're going to get a first and a second round right now for a guy like that. But
with 1 year left before he becomes a UFA. Yeah.
That's the thing.
I don't think they're going to trade him. I think it's Mikheyev on his way out.
They'll find a way to make it work. I really think so. Whether they got to give him a little bit more term or, maybe he takes a 3-year deal and he cashes back in when he's 29. Who knows? But
Yep. They have almost $24 million in cap space available as well. I know they've got several guys to sign, but they got to decide. Dakota Joshua. I doubt Elias Lindholm is coming back, although they really like the way he played in the playoffs. But I got to think Boston's gonna throw him some money.
Ooh, Boston. Okay. I think they're going to go after another Canuck by the name of Elias Lindholm, but we'll see about that.
No, that's what I'm saying. Elias
Lindholm.
I thought
you said Dakota Joshua. I'm sorry.
Dakota. I'm sorry. Yes, I did say Dakota Joshua. Then I said Elias Lindholm.
Yeah, I missed that. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think Boston's going after Lindholm.
Yeah, absolutely.
About to. All right, that's our show. Thanks for listening. Again, you can find us on Instagram and TikTok and Twitter or X, whatever you call it, at OT Hockey Talk, ot.hockey.talk. All the links are in the description below. Just click them, follow us, and you can let us know what you think. Leave some comments, and we will be back after both conference finals are over and Stanley Cup finals will be beginning. We'll do a preview of the Stanley Cup finals. Until then, enjoy the rest of the third round, and we'll talk to you soon.